Then I will say something on these design principles. What I actually we defined these 6 design principles within that large project that that I mentioned, KP Lab project, and there are 6 of them. In this picture, the first and 6th of the 2 of them are kind of maybe the main design principles. The first one is about this organizing work around shared objects, and the last one is about having tools. Of course, in this KP Lab project, also tools were emphasized, so maybe that is one reason that it's that it can be seen as a kind of one of the main design principles. And I will say something on all these design principles. Maybe one way of understanding how what these design principles are is to see them as kind of to think about those 3 metaphors of learning. So the first one was this kind of a very individualistic and oriented to facts and conceptual knowledge. The other one was about social practices and social interaction. And I think this the main idea of knowledge creation metaphor or trialogical learning is to have kind of elements on both of these approaches. To think how to combine individualistic work and social and collaborative processes and conceptual knowledge and then practices of doing things together. But I say shortly on all of these design principles. There's a lot of text here, but maybe I try to say some main ideas on those. So as I said, and what I have already explained here, the first one is kind of a main idea or characteristics of this trialogical learning, that the aim is to organize courses or seminars so that, or whatever the context is, so that people collaboratively develop some things and modify, version, build on each other's work and really co-create or co-construct things together. That's kind of a main idea. And what it can include different kinds of things. For example, what I tried to explain about this kind of object-oriented discussions, that instead of having very diverse or scattered discussions somehow oriented on certain issues and try to develop also with discussion certain concrete things together. And of course, there are many challenges within this kind of approach. We collected some of these challenges, and one basic challenge is that very often courses or the possibilities to do this kind of trialogical work, they are very short. So you have if you have a short course, for example, in university, you don't have time to really start building any kind of a complex object together. So it must be thought carefully what kind of things can be done within some short time frame. And of course, another basic challenge is that this kind of a way of working is not very common. So it takes somewhat time to learn it, and then you should have it more kind of as a sustained way of doing it across not just within one course, but to do it many times in order to learn it. The second design principle is about integrated personal interest and personal ways of working, and this kind of a collective or social way of organizing the whole thing. And at least the kind of ideal would be that people would use their own specific interest and use that while doing things together. So not just do kind of a group work which does not mean to yourself so much, but really try to use that kind of an knowledge or interest or expertise that you already have, and then put that also to those collaborative works. And the idea is also that people should learn to take responsibility of this kind of a social aspect, to notice that they can take responsibility of this, not just on their own work, but to have specific roles and responsibilities of how the whole group is working. And I think that this is also kind of a demanding design principle if it's taken fully, because it requires that those things that are done together are organized so that there are some specific interest for all the participants. The third design principle was about fostering longer-term processes of knowledge advancement, because the kind of a model for this knowledge creation metaphor comes from the idea that how people develop things together in general, and then our basic observation was that it does not happen from scratch, that people need to learn how to do things, and also they are using those things and materials and practices that others have used before. So also when it comes to what students should be or pupils should be doing, they should be able to somehow use those kind of things that others have done and build on that kind of an experience. And concretely also it can include on using those kind of artifacts and issues that others have developed. And maybe this is easier to see from the point of view of teachers, that teachers can use those similar things and ways of organizing things, and also concrete documents that can be reused and then try to develop further in subsequent courses or whatever the focus is in specific case. And the long-term processes, also this design principles is also related to the idea that these things that are done should be somehow authentic. And the word authentic is a bit it's not very maybe very apt term here, but it means that somehow these things should be more or more similar to, not just within the pedagogical settings or pedagogical institutions, but be more linked to what is happening outside specific educational institutional settings, to somehow have a kind of real life influences. And this is of course also challenging very often because it needs to have a kind of a very long-term view on how to develop also education from this point of view, and how really to reuse in fruitful way those materials used in previous courses, so that it still leaves room for further development within those new courses. The fourth design principle is also related on those, or at least I see it very much related to those metaphors of learning, because we were saying that this kind of dichotomy of conceptual knowledge or facts and then social processes and practices, or there are other kind of those kind of dichotomies about tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge, and we were saying that if we think how people really develop things together, it should include all different ways of using knowledge and doing things together. So it should include ideas and questions, but also taking into account practical issues and ways of organizing things, and having different ways also of different media to present things, not just by text, but using figures and pictures and maybe conceptualization, concept maps, for example, and so on. So that is typical way of developing things. Try to use all kind of information and also organize the work accordingly. And of course, that is also a challenge if, on the other hand, we were what I have been trying to say here is the idea of trialogical learning is to focus on certain issues and try to organize the work so that students are really developing things together and not to wander too much around on all kinds of issues. And this design principle, in a way, emphasizes also that there should be different ways of presenting things and using different kind of knowledge. So there is a kind of tension how to keep the work still focused and not just to have all kinds of presentations, for example. The final two design principles. First one was about, this is also quite demanding design principle. At least I think that it is quite demanding often, that how to the idea is to use kind of a cross-fertilization of different kind of knowledge or expertise from different institutions. So not to have the work only within specific educational institution, but for example have some experts or people from other institutions than the specific educational institution to be part of the learning process, somehow to be involved with with the learning. So that is also one way of or one way how we try to bring in more this kind of authentic or authenticity, meaning here that it's not just within educational settings how things are done, but those issues that students are dealing with, they have a kind of more meaning outside that educational settings. So the cross-fertilization means that there are different kinds of ways of doing things, certain kind of ways or certain ways within educational settings, and then there might be some more professional practices, for example, or whatever that kind of a collaborate with whom the collaboration is done. There is a different kind of practices, and the idea is to somehow merge them or use them or cross-fertilize them so that that something new comes also from that point of view. And of course, this kind of collaboration, it requires quite a lot, especially from teachers usually, because teachers need to organize things with these outside communities and be very active on that, and think how to do that, and have also resources for doing that. So in that sense, it's quite demanding design principle. And the last design principle is, I think it's maybe quite obvious if we are talking about digital technologies, that the basic idea for us has been that these kind of triological processes are not new as such. People have been doing that kind of collaboration for ages, in a way. That's kind of a very typical human way of doing things, so that you are building on. Actually, the basic idea is that it's a kind of that's the way how things are done culturally. That we use each other's achievements and build on those achievements and try to develop them and use them further. But of course, new digital technology gives new opportunities of doing those kind of processes. So it's much easier to work on each other's texts or models and build on that. So, but about those challenges, one problem nowadays often is that there are many kinds of tools, and you need to really think how to make a combination of those tools, and how to have that kind of a set of those digital tools that you can really easily and flexibly use that technology within those kind of processes. So it's not necessarily so even if there are a lot of technologies around, it's not always easy to use it within these kind of triological processes. If I have, maybe I can shortly give a kind of an example how I think that these design principles can be used. So this example is from my own teaching, actually. So it's from the university teaching, and it's quite small and simple, but I think that maybe it gives kind of an idea how those design principles can be applied. So a typical or kind of traditional way of having a seminar in university, at least in Finland, is that people give a short presentation on their own seminar paper, and then there is one opponent giving comments on that, and then there's some discussions, oral discussion during the seminar. And I think there are many strengths on that kind of a way of working, but there are also problems. For example, at least it used to be so that the comments were often more critical than constructive, because there also is a certain time limit for giving those comments. Students do not know so well each other's seminar papers, because if you are not opponent, you are not so motivated in reading each other's papers, and also those opponents are not, they don't remember those papers very well after those seminars, and a lot of those comments disappear in a way because there is not enough time to give those comments. And so I think that this what we have been doing in some of our seminars is not just me, is that there is a small groups, 3 or 4 people giving comments to each other's work, and then there are not just one presentation during the seminar sessions, but 2 papers, so people have more time to get to know to those each other's papers. And one change is also that all these comments are, there is a discussion during the seminar, but also those comments are put to some learning environment or directly to those documents. So this is a very simple example, but it shows that the idea is to focus more on those kind of collaborative issues and think how to change more individualistically oriented ways of doing, to have more these kind of collaborative elements and more sustained or focused and long-term processes where people really get to know each other's work better, and then give also maybe more constructive comments. So this example is not using all of those design principles, but focusing more on how to change this kind of a traditional way of working more, to have more this what I would call object-oriented aspects. At the end, I listed here some of those projects where this trialogical approach has been developed. So this big project that I mentioned, this knowledge practices laboratory project, and now it is already ended, 2011. Now there is a KNORK project where University of Helsinki and also Metropolia from Helsinki is involved, and it's about teacher training and using also these trialogical ideas within secondary and higher education. And as you all also probably heard from my speech here, the trialogical approach has been developed especially in higher education. So there is not much, it hasn't been much in elementary schools. So that is one interesting issue, how much it can be used there. But I think it especially in that KNORK project, the idea is to use trialogical approach within teachers' collaboration. So that is that it can be applied within teachers' collaboration in different educational levels. So I think that's one way of thinking about it. But it will be interesting to hear how you see it, how it can be applied also within elementary schools. So okay, I think I stop here. and we can have some discussions, I hope. Okay, thank you, Sami.